guys in the dark.
This was during a graveyard shift at a gas station. Full serve gets shut down around 11 p.m. because there's only one clerk on the site. Traffic cones block the full serve pumps. Signs inform the customers of this as well. Right around midnight, a van decides to pull up with California license plates and peace and love signs on the windows. This woman gets out, moves the traffic cones, and then pulls up to the full serve. I use the intercom to let her know that she will have to use the self-serve if she wants gas. There's no answer. I go to the door. I try to wave her over and call out to her. Can't see any sign of her, so I shrug and I go back inside. I'm not allowed to leave that store unattended, so there's not much that I really can do about it. 10 minutes later, a woman gets out of the van and then comes in. She says that I've been waiting for service for over an hour. I decided not to argue about the time elapsed and say, I'm very sorry, ma'am, but we don't offer full serve after 11 o'clock. Perhaps you noticed the traffic cones and all the signs to that effect. You expect me to pump my own gas? She says to me. Again, I am sorry. I'd be happy to help you, but I can't leave this store unattended. I appreciate your understanding. She snorts and then digs a 20 out of her purse, and she throws it on the counter. She goes out, moves the van to self-serve, pumps her gas, and then she comes right back in. May I use your restroom, please? She asks me. Sure, it's right back there. I was relieved for some reason. She goes to the restroom, and she's in there for about 15 minutes. I really start to worry. Finally, she decides to come out, and comes to the counter. I know all about you, she says to me. You're the one that brought the Black Plague. You brought it here, to us, forever. It was always you. You caused all of those deaths, all that suffering. Did you like hearing the babies wail and scream? I bet you loved it. All the demons loved it, didn't they? That's you. You're a demon. You are evil. I can tell. And I'll tell you something else. You skunk me up. I'll skunk you back. I stared directly at her, retreating back speechless. She got in her van and then drove away. Skunk her up. Because I didn't pump her gas? That's weird, I thought. I had gone back to fronting shelves for about 30 seconds before I thought, perhaps I should go check that bathroom. I walked back and I pushed open the door. There was shit. Shit was everywhere. And I'm talking about it was on the walls, the floor, all over the mirror, the sink, all over the toilet lid, and the tank. It was even on the door. Clearly it was all smeared by hand. Oh, and by the way, that stink. I will never forget that putrid smell. It almost made me gag.
Back in 2007, I started a tech job with an IP phone void DP1 long-distance company. The company is no longer around, and honestly, I don't know how they stayed in business as long as they did. It was really a pyramid scheme, but thankfully, I was on the IT side of things, so I didn't have to sell anything. It was a small, typical tech support call center. The customers would call into Verizon, QQuest, etc., would call in and say DT1 lines were down, or outages were there. I was the only female on my team, having to prove myself and show that I'd do anything male counterparts could do. It didn't take long, and the customers respected me for being able to handle things. After making my mark, I decided to take the 10-hour night shifts. I worked Wednesday through Saturday from 1 p.m. to 12 a.m., and after 6 p.m., I was completely alone in the whole building. The rush to get out of the office by 6 p.m. was insane. I wouldn't blame them, though, but I decided having 3 days off was better than 2. Like I said, I was by myself for most of the night. I would have to keep an eye on emails and make sure I answered calls. It was a very slow shift indeed. I would get a lot of video game, reading, or schoolwork done during this time. But sometimes, I would just wander the building, walk around just to get away from my desk for a time. I would have the VoIP phone system connected to my cell phone so no calls would be missed. This allowed me to get to a soda, go get food, and so on. One time while I was up away from my desk, I was going down to the lunchroom to grab a soda. The vending machine was on the basement floor. The basement had a wall of windows and one set of security doors. Same for the main entrance. Only there was one camera facing that door. Nothing else really made me feel very safe. I didn't like going to the basement much because the back of the building faced an arch of dark woods. There was a walking path to the woods, but for some reason, they didn't install lights for the walking path. Never really sure why that was, but it didn't help the creepy factor. Sometimes I would see animals run past, but other times, I felt like someone was just watching me. I always try to make it fast when getting a soda or a snack, but sometimes it didn't feel fast enough. So one night, I was making my way down to the basement of the building to get a soda. It was a slow, dragging night, and needed a little caffeine for a pick-me-up. I counted my money as I walked to make sure that I had enough to get in and out quick. But out of the corner of my eye, I saw something dart from the glass door back into the darkness. I stopped dead in my tracks and tried to scan the forest, but like I said, it was just blackness. I felt a bit of unease, and everything told me to turn on my heels and go back to my desk. But it was like 9 p.m., and I had a fair bit of time left on my shift before I could blow this pop stand. I tried shaking the feeling off, and briskly walked over to the soda machine and made my selection. The soda dropped, and as I bent down to get it, I heard a loud ping noise. It was as if someone had hit the glass with something. I stood straight up and felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I slowly turned around and was scared to see someone out there. But as I made the full turn, I saw once again nothing but darkness. I thought this was a good time to book it back up to the main floor. I didn't bother with the elevator. I went to the stairs and just ran up them. My heart was already racing from having to go down there in the first place, and then the loud bang, and now running up 2 flights of stairs. Once I was back at my desk, I sunk down in my chair and tried to calm down. It was just one noise. I was in a building with locked doors and locked inner offices. I kept saying over and over in my head it was just nothing. I was relieved by that, but out of nowhere, I got that feeling of someone watching me again. I peeked up over my cubicle wall and looked around my office. Nothing seemed out of place until I turned to face the front of the building. Outside the first set of doors was a slender, tall, dark male. He was cupping his hands around his eyes to try and see past the reflection of the lights inside. I dropped back down in my cubicle before he caught sight of me. He didn't look like anyone I'd ever seen in the office, and it was a little past 9 p.m. There was no reason why he is checking out my office. As I sit in my chair, I hear the doors shake. I slowly stood up and watched him pull at the handles of the door. They didn't budge, to my relief. But as I watched him, he turned to face me. His face looked bruised or dirty. I couldn't tell which one. Once his eyes locked onto me, he started to bang harder and smacked the glass. I was so scared. It was in the middle of the night. I was by myself and out in the middle of this office building complex. I grabbed my headset and dialed 911. While getting the operator on the line, the guy was walking back and forth from one side of the glass to the next. The 911 asked me what the emergency was. I told them where I worked and what my name was. I needed someone to come out immediately. Told them that there was a guy trying to break into my office building. While speaking with her, the guy disappeared from my view. I tried to look in all directions, but I just didn't see him anymore. I knew he wouldn't just walk off, not with how hard he was trying to bang on the doors. And out of nowhere, a good-sized rock came out of nowhere and smashed into the door. I screamed and went under my desk. The operator asked what happened, and I explained that a rock smashed against the glass window. She asked me if the glass was broken enough to let him in. I didn't want to stand up and look, but she told me to look in order to know where he was now. I crawled out from under my desk and just peeked over my wall and saw a huge crack down the first part of the door. I sank back down and told her to please have an officer hurry. She said they were on their way. I have read many of these stories on sub-articles, and people say that the cops wouldn't get there fast enough. They just weren't kidding. It feels like time is standing still, and you can do absolutely nothing about it. Another smash against the door, but along with that glass-breaking sound, sirens could be heard coming towards my building. It was definitely music to my ears. I told the operator that the police had arrived and thanked her for all her support. I stood backed up and looked over the cubicle wall, and the red and blue lights were flashing wildly. But the thing I didn't see was the man. The top part of the door was completely smashed, and the rock was lying on the outside of the entryway. The officer came to the front door, and others were out combing the area. I could see their flashlights moving all around the parking lot. The first officer to come in the building and greet me was a very kind man. He was patient with me and let me explain what I saw happen. Soon, my boss arrived and checked on me, then the damage. At some point, my husband was called and told I could be escorted home by one of the officers. I took a few days off and started to look for another job that wasn't by myself at night. When I gave my statement, I explained to the officer that the person could be partnered with my ex-coworkers who was fired a few weeks prior for stealing and just not showing up. He knew when people came and went. He knew where we kept the cell phones we were selling. Not under lock and key, but under a desk of a provisioner, from smartphones to Blackberries, plus VoIP boxes and phone cards. I went on to leave this job a month later and started at a credit card machine company. It was an office full of people, still a call center, but I felt a lot safer there, especially with the security and cameras all over the building. Like I said before, this company is no longer around. It was bought up by another company, and they basically liquidated all the funds that were worth something. So dirty man who tried to break into my office, let's never meet again.
I had worked at a very small convenience store in the early 90s. They had one of those fried delis that had chicken, JoJo's, which are deep-fried potato wedges, corn dogs, burritos, and all that kind of stuff. This particular night, I had to run out of burritos and chicken. I also shut the thing down, cleaned out everything about an hour before closing. Right about 5 minutes before I was closing up, a guy decides to walk in and ask for some burritos. I told him that I happened to be out of them, and that I was just about to close, and the fryer was shut down. He walked around the store for a moment. I assumed that he was looking for something else to buy. And then he had come up to the counter, pulled out a knife, and told me if I didn't cook him some burritos right now, he was going to stab me. I had freaked out, but I told him that I had none to cook. I even showed him the freezer, and told him I would be happy to cook him anything else that he wanted from it, but he will see that I was out of burritos. He looked in for a moment, then he chuckled. Suddenly he turned to me and said, "You really are out." I replied to him, "Yes, we are." He then decides to put the knife away and walks out the store. I haven't seen him since. I used to work the graveyard shift at a gas station near my place. It was a pretty normal night. Clean, stock smokes, clean once again, sit right behind the counter and do nothing. A woman came in, about mid-30s, with a little boy with her. She was in tears, and her clothing were torn quite a bit. She had come up and asked to use our phone. When she had got off, without getting any answer, she asked to stay there for a little bit. I told her that it would be no problem by me. About 20 minutes had gone by, and I wound up giving her and her kid free drinks. One of the sandwiches that we had on the hot rack as well. She was in the store for about 30 minutes until her boyfriend had came in and found her and her child. He was pretty calm at first, but then he started screaming at her and telling her that she needs to come home with him. Luckily, before anything crazy had happened, a cruiser pulls up to the front. 2 cops pull in and intervene the guy. He was arrested right then and there. I guess he had been beating her in front of her child. She was trying to run away from him. I'm glad that I got to keep her away from harm for at least a little bit longer. That really was a scary night.
The mall I used to work the night shift for still gives me goosebumps to this day. So the mall I worked at was very, very large. Probably the largest in my state, I'd say. And all the way up to about 8:30 p.m., it would still be quite busy. Only around 9:30 would we manage to usher all the stragglers out, and only at 11 p.m. would all the business owners have left. My job was basically to patrol the mall and make sure there was no one sticking around after the doors were closed during the night. We didn't have guns or batons, only a can of mace that was rarely used. There were multiple occasions where we would find would-be thieves hiding around trying to break into shops after dark, but they were normally far outnumbered by 4 to 5 of us on shift at a time, and they would usually be intimidated by me or some of the other imposing members of the security. This one night, though, shift started getting really weird for me on the night shift, so I'd say it was about 2 o'clock, and I was standing in the middle of the empty food court eating a sandwich. This was the only part of the mall that had any light at night time due to the night sky, so it was comfortable to eat there. While I was eating, though, I heard a dull scraping noise from the hallway leading off from the food courts into some toilets. It sounded like a piece of metal dragging across the floor. I was immediately put on edge and flicked on my torch flashlight without a moment of hesitation. I can remember creeping down the hallway with my flashlight in hand, illuminating a good 6 to 7 meters in front of me. As I got closer and closer to the end of the hall, the noise became louder and louder until I was at the end of the hallway, and there was the toilet doors to the left and the right of me. I could tell the sound was coming from the female toilets, though. I gripped the handle and opened the door a tiny little crack. The noise was now very clear and had me not scared, but really confused. I yelled, "Oi! Who is there?" The noise quickly stopped. I paused a moment, listened hard through the tiny crack of the door, and I swear to God I could hear breathing. Low, male breathing. I shut the door, still gripping the handle tightly, and flicked on my radio. "This is 1-3. I need help in the food court bathrooms. I think someone's there." No response. This was really strange, and it put me further on edge. Policy was to always answer the radio, and now I was truly becoming quite alarmed. "This is 1-3. Come in. Anyone copy?" Still with no response. I can remember whispering to myself, "What the actual fuck?" I began opening the door a tiny crack. "Listen, mate," I said, sounding as intimidating as possible. "If you don't fucking come out of your hands up, you're going to end up eating your teeth tonight. Do you want that?" I sat there at the door, quite honestly terrified at this point, but there was no response. In fact, now, there was no noise at all. I yelled into the bathroom, "Okay, mate, I'm coming in. If you do anything stupid, it's not my fault you'll never walk again." I tried my hardest to sound scary, but my voice was quivering at this point. This whole situation made no sense at all. Why would someone be in the female bathrooms? What was that metal noise? What the hell is actually happening? I very slowly opened the door and scanned my flashlight slowly across the room. All the cubicles were open. Weird. But other than that, the room was totally empty. I was totally shitting myself about now. I was definitely losing it. I walked into the center of the bathroom, closing the door behind me. Scared to the core, I let out a faint. "This is some horror movie crap, eh? Come out." When I heard the long, whining squeak of the door behind me, I span around, basically crying at this point, and shone my torch on a freaking massive man. At least a head taller than me, or so, and it seemed at my state, this time, he was Caucasian, and at least in his 40s, with matte gray hair all over his forehead. He was mid-opening the door, but he stopped dead still in the middle of his action. He just looked at me, smiling this guilty freaking smile like a kid would make when he gets caught stealing biscuits or some crap like that. I'm not going to lie. I was so scared, I froze. He lifted his fingers up to his mouth. "Shh," before swinging the door open all the way, and sprinted out with what looked like some type of small metal box in his hand. Turns out he was just behind the toilet door where I was opening it, and I totally missed him. I was so freaking close to him, and I didn't even freaking notice him. He could have killed me if he had a knife or something, and that thought still haunts me to this day. Turns out, later that night, my radio miraculously started working again, and I got right on to telling my coworkers about my story. They collectively went pale when I told them what happened. They all had similar stories, but none that were as much of a close shave as mine. I worked the night shift for another week after that before I quit. I'm not sticking around in a job like that. I needed help, and for some reason my radio fucked itself. Why, though? So weird old guy in the toilet, let's not meet again.
If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night. And I'll see you next time.